Dr. Muir's departure had preceded that of General Gorgo and was followed after a certain number of months by that of Madame de Monttalon and her children. Of the members of the suite, Cipriani had died February 1818, and after that Lepage and Gentilini had returned, the one to France and the other to Elba. The former place was taken by a French cook who had, I think, been attached to the household of Lord Amherst and had remained at Longwood after his departure for Europe. Of all those who had formed the colony at Longwood, there remained with the Emperor only the Grand Marshal and his family, General de Monttalon, and 5 servants. When a sad future presented itself to the Emperor's eyes, a number of those who had accompanied him into exile had left, and he saw the years flowing by without his jailers thinking of loosening his chains. Had he not been unhappy enough? Would he have to drink the chalice to the dregs? What mortal could experience greater vicissitudes of fortune than he had? Once he had seen all the princes and all the nations of Europe at his feet. Today he was reduced almost to himself, abandoned on a rock which was separated from the rest of the universe. He would say in his sad moments, the time will come when everybody, friends and enemies, will all be satisfied. The first will have nothing to fear from a power which oppresses them, and the latter will find themselves free of all obstacles to their designs. The gray frock coat will never frighten them anymore, and they will march ahead without looking behind them. The Emperor seemed to rise superior to all his sorrows. His moral courage had been put to the proof long ago. Nothing which went on in his soul could be seen on his features. He looked with a calm air on everything about him. Apparently, he had nothing more to fear from this earth, which saw him still standing erect. But all his woes were concentrated at the bottom of his heart, and it was not in his power to drive them away, do what he might. So when he was plunged in reflections, he was swamped by them. Hope alone held him up. At times he liked to think that in time the hatred of his enemies would cease to pursue him and persecute him, and that at last he would enjoy the inexpressible benefit of liberty on some hospitable shore. Since the departure of Madame de Monttalon and her children, Longwood had become more lonely. One needed all his courage to divert his thoughts from this increase in monotony. If one can imagine a small number of people constantly in one another's society for an unlimited time and separated from all other human beings, he could form a just idea of their existence. If the life appeared gloomy for those about the Emperor, what must it have been for him? Napoleon. Movement, activity was necessary for the colony at Longwood. The Emperor himself gave the example of it in opposing active work to idleness. One was the remedy for all ills, while the other was the source of them by leaving too much time for the reflections to which one was naturally led when he had no distraction to break the monotony of the daily life. The Emperor went to work again on his memoirs, which he had neglected for a long time. He made corrections, additions, and changes in them. The campaigns of Italy and Egypt were almost finished. The provisional consulate also. Other parts received a first dictation. What stopped the Emperor in his work was that he had not yet got the numbers of the Moniteur which he needed. While waiting for them to be sent, he occupied himself with the summaries of the campaigns of Caesar, Turenne, and Frederick the Great. If he had had all the books that he wanted, and if his health had permitted, he would have carried out his design of making summaries of the campaigns of all the great captains, ancient as well as modern. When the 3 summaries which he had planned were finished, he designed a work on field fortifications. The models that he intended to use in this new work were constructed on the spot, and when he had tried them, he had a fair copy made of the profiles and then dictated instructions as to the manner and time of using them. This work gave him great pleasure. It recalled to him his first years in the military profession. At almost the same time, he made a plan for the composition of an army, and on the subject of staffs, he did not have time to perfect these different works. He only worked spasmodically. He did not like to do dry work for several months on the same subject. His imagination led him to change them ceaselessly, and consequently most of what he did remained imperfect. His ideas were, so to speak, only thrown on paper, and he awaited materials to complete and develop them. All the writings which the Emperor caused to be made employed only the Grand Marshal, Monsieur de Monttalon, Marchand, and myself. That is, of course, after the departure of Monsieur de las Casas and General Gorgo. The first 2 wrote from his dictation, and The two others made clean copies. About the middle of the year 1819, I think, all of us who were in the Emperor's household service had the idea of cleaning up our rooms, as well as the corridor which led to them. Everything had remained as Admiral Cockburn's sailors had made it, but damp, dryness, and wind had caused the paper to peel off the partitions and had torn it, and these partitions were only of slats sawn by pit saw. The corridor had no ceiling, but the black roof beams, which were hidden by an immense quantity of spider webs, which hung down on our heads. The whole place was hideous. After making our preparations, we went to work to make a ceiling for the corridor. We stretched cloths from one end of it to the other and glued blue paper on it. The partitions were also covered with paper. So much for the exterior. When this first thing had been done, it gave a little air of neatness to the place. There was somewhat more style in our rooms. We used a lighter paper for the ceilings than that of the corridor, and the walls of each room were covered with a figured paper, each one having chosen a color and design different from his neighbors. When this was finished, we still needed something to cover the floor, which was composed of badly joined boards. One of us, Novaras, discovered the way for us to procure what we needed. He recollected that the floor of the Emperor's reception room had originally been covered with a painted cloth, and that a carpet had been laid down later over it. He thought that this cloth, which was perfectly useless, would be doing much better by concealing our planks. When he had given us the example, we followed it. Our rooms, which had become quite passable, became still more so thanks to this new decoration. One day the Emperor, who wished to see what we had done, honored our garrets with his presence. He examined and inspected scrupulously everything there and complimented each of us on the manner in which his room was arranged. He began with Marchand's room, in which was a mahogany wardrobe which contained all the visitor's clothes, his linen, and many other articles belonging to him. He examined everything that belonged to him carefully and in detail, turning everything over but without taking the trouble to put it back in its place. The Emperor had passed from Marchand's room to the next one, and finally he arrived at Novaraz's, which was at the end of the left wing of the house. He thought the view from it admirable. He could look down from the window on the wood of logwood. The Black Rock was on his left, and on the right there were the numerous ravines in which the valley ended. Above and directly facing one were the sea and its vast horizon.